Everybody, welcome. I'm Manish, Chief Operating Officer for 𝐇𝐚𝐫𝐥𝐞𝐞𝐧 AI. Thank you for joining us, and I will be your host for the next half an hour with my special guest, Harleen Bedi, who is the CTO of the Quality Engineering at Infosys. She's been helping customers for more than 25 years embrace all the changes that have been going on in the quality engineering. And I'm sure with her learned experience, we'll get to know what's been going on in the AI space with respect to QE. Thank you, Harleen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Before
Thanks
I
for
give
having me
it
here.
to, yeah, thank you, Harleen. Before I hand it over to Harleen to introduce herself as well, please feel free to join into the conversation. Use the 𝐇𝐚𝐫𝐥𝐞𝐞𝐧 hashtag on LinkedIn and X, and make sure that you participate as well. Welcome, Harleen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Manish and 𝐇𝐚𝐫𝐥𝐞𝐞𝐧 for having me here. So really glad to be part of this conference today. So a quick about myself. I know this conference is a lot about testing, AI and all. I'm very glad to be part of it because that's what I've been doing from last, more than 2 decades. So I've grown as a tester and right now I'm a Chief Technology Officer for Quality Engineering at Infosys. And very passionately working on how AI is reshaping our whole industry, especially from the quality engineering perspective. So looking forward for a conversation, Manish, on this today, and we'll share as we speak further.
Yeah, I think the world has changed in the last 1 year. It has definitely changed the last 2 decades that you mentioned. I remember I also used to be a tester testing Netscape products back in the day, and I won't even tell you which decade it was. And at that point in time, it was all about how I, as a tester, could break the system. I used to get a lot of kick from going back to the development team and saying, this is not working, you didn't code for it, and this is how I've broken the system. I think in this conversation, I'd love to learn how AI is sort of changing that. Are developers getting challenged by agents? Are agents talking to QEs who are challenging developers? So I think in this conversation, myself and the audience would love to learn from your experience in this space.
Yeah, absolutely, Manish. And I think you don't have to tell me which decade because I'm sure I'm like almost on a similar decade when I started doing testing, right? And very interestingly, I think it puts me down on the memory lane because if you look at maybe 2 decades ago when we were saying that we are testing and what the developers will look at, so we had very clear requirement documents, right? So we used to ask, give me a requirement document, give me all the specs, give me these user flow diagrams, everything we had as a tester at our disposal, right? And then we will refer to that, and everything was, very, very predictable. So if A plus B will always produce C. And and third, very interesting thing was we had a lot of time to do testing. I remember when I started doing testing, now it feels very funny, but we used to have testing cycles like almost of 6 months sometime.
Yeah.
Right? So we had almost 6 months to test the whole product, and we had all the luxury to create all tests and first and many times we will not even automate fully. So and every time we go to the developer screen, like you said, and tell I'll show you how to reproduce this defect. So all those were the prehistoric era, if we may want to see. But the changes that we have seen even before AI. So earlier it was everything was predictable, everything we knew that we have run a huge a block of all kind of tests. We have found all possible kind of defects, and now we are good to signal that go ahead and release it in production. But what changed over last 2 decades? So one very interesting shift that came was with Agile, right? With the scale and speed changed. So you no longer had those 6 months kind of time window. Those time windows shrink. So you have to, and it was not just one time you have to say, okay, go, no go. So those cycles become very small. So you are doing it more frequently, in some cases, even hourly, right? That is how frequently the releases started going. And second shift that came. So I remember my first testing I did was for a desktop application, right? A monolithic kind of architecture and all. And the architectures change. So if you're testing, distributed service-based architectures, then you just cannot say without checking all the integrations are working or not. So that was another shift that came, right? So now you are running a lot of hypotheses about, what happened to that system, what happened to the integrations, and, multiple of those things. Now, while all these things were at a play, and we all have seen what happened in last year or two with AI coming into this whole existing ecosystem. So now what happened with AI coming in, additional dimensions that got added, maybe 2 or 3 things which I wanted to call out, and how it has changed the way we are doing, or way we are reporting defects, or way we are saying, yes, we are done with testing. So one thing is, we are no longer testing the deterministic systems. So we don't even know, we cannot write a traditional test case by saying that I know this model won't hallucinate. So ABC, this model won't hallucinate. So, and there is no way if I find a bug and it will be fixed once for all, because we know the AI systems will drift, it will change even without making any change in your application, or even without changing a piece of code, right? It might start drifting. Then second major shift that has happened is, and we have seen, we are writing, and now luckily I'm not writing the test myself, but I know my team is writing those tests using AI. So most of the tests themselves are written by AI. Now, how do you trust that? Correct. So that's another process that you have to prove that, yes, I have covered everything. These are safe to be used. These are good to go. So that writing of the testing, that is also being done by AI itself. And third, very interesting, which has happened is, earlier, if the defect was found, it is maybe localized in certain area or certain modules or certain application. But now with AI coming in, we are not able to predict the blast radius, right? So where all it will impact if something goes wrong, where all, this, because these decisions are being made in some autonomous way. So if those failures are not detected early enough, then what happens? The impact has become multifold, right? So right now, when as a tester, we are testing and we are saying, yes, these systems are good to go. We are not saying that I have tested everything. So earlier coverage was main thing, right? I've done 100% coverage. We used to say that very proudly. But now that is no longer, benchmark or a question. Now what we are saying is, I have a process in place. I trust my pipeline. I trust my systems. And I build that trust into system, which is dynamic in nature. So I think that's a lot that has changed. And the way I have seen, the teams approaching this whole testing has changed drastically over the years that we have seen it. I hope it
Very interesting.
you
Yeah,
resonate with some of these things.
absolutely. But it also brings one question, which is, quality used to be a gate and still is a gate, right? And in the whole agile process, there would be a team putting up their hand and saying, yes, I've tested it, good to go.
Yeah.
Right now, in this space, as you said, the boundaries are not known. The agents or the AI code is testing something.
Right.
So how do you trust that this is ready to ship? Who's going to say yes?
Yeah. So I think there is a lot of that governance layer that we have to put, right? And when we are saying, and that's what I was saying earlier also. So we have to build a process on which you can trust. That's a governance layer on top of it. Because, when my AI itself is doing testing, so I cannot say that, AI will say, because end of it, liability still remains with humans. Right? So we as humans still own that AI. AI is just a means to end. So AI will not own some of these things. And that is where, if we have a proper governance layer set up, where we have identified, what exactly we are testing, what a failure means, what are the thresholds that we need to test for, how can we give a traceability of why certain decisions were made by AI, or why AI has written these tests. So let's say if AI has written certain number of tests and it has marked something as pass, so why it has done. So if we are able to give those kind of traceabilities, and the second thing is, if we are able to, so interesting thing which was not earlier in testing, right? Was it was not only a role was we ship to production and we are good, right? So we were not getting into what happens in production, but now our role is not stopping there, because the very important aspect of the observability, what drifts are happening even in the production, and how soon. So we cannot avoid all those drifts. So that is impossible to do. We cannot say that, yes, my system is built, I have tested a system which will not show any drift, because there are so many dynamics in the system. So in that case, the guardrail or the governance that we have to build, how soon I can identify the drift and how soon I can, help you fix those kind of drifts. So that's a kind of, if governance layer from different levels, right? First of all, identifying, what exactly is your criteria, right? So what are your thresholds? Who has tested, producing some kind of traceability evidence to that, and finally being able to do that, even in the post-production, fail fast, what we say, fail fast and fix fast. So those are some of things I think are really required in these AI systems.
Got it. And I think the process on governance makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Traceability is important because traceability now is not only on, the test cases that you wrote and the response or pass or fail that you got, the artifacts around what were the prompts that were used, right? I think that also becomes an artifact which needs to sort of feed back into the governance layer. And it's an interesting thing that you mentioned that you're seeing the QE team work more on post-production as well to look at observability and diagnostics. So how do you see the role of the QE evolving? Because this is one question which is coming up. If AI is going to write all the tests, if AI is going to run all the tests, if AI is going to decide the coverage, what is the QE going to do?
That's my favorite question, because this is not the question we get only in respect to AI. Any change happen in the industry, this is the first question we get, right, as QA practitioner. So I remember when this whole Agile thing came in, so same question popped in. Oh, now QA will be obsolete because everything a developer will test also, they will do everything. So I think this is a very interesting question. And given that I have lived across decades being a QE professional and still staying relevant, so I think answer, and I can give some maybe inputs, what I feel, how the role will change with respect to AI, right? So if you look at the key underlying thing is, how do we stay relevant? So what is the biggest strength as QE professionals? So we know the systems very well. We have a very good hold of functional domain knowledge, right? I'm leaving aside the usual ones. We need to understand these tools. We need to know all these AI tools. We need to understand models. All that is given. That is your foundation. But where do you create your niche, right? How do you stay relevant? Now, there are two dimensions to it. One, I believe that this is a very golden era for all the testers, because they have a very good functional understanding of the systems that they have been working on, right? And if you look at any of the AI systems, or the whatever artifacts we create on top of it, even if we say that AI will create all my test scripts, you give a default prompt without any functional knowledge, we all know what kind of output it will generate and how relevant and how good it is, unless and until we fill in that required context. And who is going to give that context is these domain experts or the functional testers or the engineers who had understood that over a period of time. So very big opportunity on this side of thing, what we call as, how are you augmenting your AI in typical QE journey, right? If I'm writing test cases, test scripts, my test data, so all that things, you bring your domain knowledge, you build those context layer on top of all these things, you stay very, very relevant, right? That's a different thing that you want to do, or you should start looking at. The second very big opportunity I see for all of us is on, we are talking about trust, right? Building trust.
Yes.
Building those kind of foundation on who ensures that this goes into production and all that. So I think one very interesting thing is how now we have to start building and reskilling ourselves to be able to build those evals, to understand how those evals are built. So, and a huge opportunity, if you look at market size also in AI trust, AI governance, a huge opportunity. That is a kind of skill, that is a kind of jobs that all the QE engineers will slowly transition into, right? So there are two, if I simplify it, there are two layers that I see it. One is where your traditional testing is being done by your functional testing, performance, security of most of your traditional applications, because the traditional applications suddenly will not vanish overnight. You still will continue to do that, where you're augmenting AI into that whole stuff, right? Where a lot of work will be done by AI, but you are only adding some context and your functional knowledge and all that on top of it. Second, newer opportunity where you should be ready is building this eval, testing the system, understanding how the governance work, be able to build those governance layers, right? Be the custodian of those quality that we always use, but now the context has changed, right? So understanding all those things, I think, is a big opportunity for all the QE professionals. That's how I look at it. And I don't see that there is anything for anybody to be scared that, AI will do all my work. We have more than enough to do.
No, I think I totally agree with you. What I am seeing in the industry today is that testing has become a lot more relevant, right? With so much code coming out as a default.
Yeah.
But a lot of these applications and code which are coming out, you don't know many of these boundary conditions. Yes, you've given a prompt,
Yep.
but you don't know what has been created. There are 100,000 lines of code written for a certain simple prompt that you wrote for creating an application, which needs a lot more testing. And I agree with you. Now we need to start thinking about, what else can we do from a functional perspective? How do we look at, the agentic application going into different areas of the application which it's not supposed to. So there is a lot of opportunity for quality engineering professionals to sort of move into this area. And I like what you said, looking at what has gone into production and try to identify stuff from there and bring it back into the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which goes back into, what we are talking about as loop engineering. Right?
Yes.
While DevOps is still there, now the loop engineering concepts are coming in and QE sits in the center of it again.
Absolutely.
Exciting times. But when you're seeing these implementations with the different customers, Harleen, I'm sure this whole quality gate, what is the customer's perspective in sign-offs, right? What constitutes as evidence for, okay, everything is good to go? Or are we looking at a scenario where it is going to be iterative? But yes, it's okay for now. Let's ship it, learn, bring it back, test again, and ship it. What do you see happening?
Yeah, so I think we did cover about that, right? And that's what we are seeing, because even if you see infusing the AI into the business side of application, it's still just in the beginning of the phase, right? We still have to see a lot of these things going into production. And now the approach, like we said with the customer, is earlier we were saying, okay, now one time good, you sign off on everything, you have signed off on some sort of coverage, some sort of a zero defect in this, my pre-prod and all those kind of things. Right now there is more openness on, because people have started understanding this whole governance that I've been talking about, right? So people are more understanding, and all those guardrails or how to put something in production are also changing, right? So when you're putting in production, so you are also building a system which will identify any of those drifts early and signal them. So that has been now focused. It is not that, so typically if you look at now, it reminds me of some very interesting thing, right? So earlier governance, or, when we have to put those gates, quality gates or whatever. So our primary focus was make sure nothing goes through this gate, make sure that everything is controlled before this gate. But that is changing now, right? And that used to slow down us overall, because everybody's busy fixing so much and they are, anxious to let anything go. Now I think the focus has changed. It is not that I have to put a very, very rigid one-time gate, but it is building those controls into the process as and when you are doing those processes, right? So if I'm building those checks and balances into the pipeline. So if I'm, let's say, doing a code, and if I have to, I've finished doing that part of piece of my coding, and then somebody is saying, okay, you run this checklist. Obviously, I will feel, little anxious, like, why should I do that? That was our way we were doing earlier, right? So now it is built into pipeline. I know upfront that I have to do it as and when my code is being run. So these all checks are also happening at the same level, right? So that is where I think a lot of these things have also shifted as part of that overall your engineering process. Plus, we are not so rigid on, okay, nothing should flow down the gate. Rather, now what the customers are taking approach, we are okay with taking some calculative risk, but we should know it fast, and we should have ability to fix it very, very quickly, right? Or switch off those components but are creating issues. So those kind of, I think, changes that we are seeing with our customers with respect to the way we are delivering the products now.
Got it. Sounds a lot like the iterative method.
Yes. So that's what has changed, Manish.
Yeah. I'd love to pick your brains on, the technical aspects of things as well, Harleen. Now that a lot of the QE teams are starting to use, agents for, writing tests, orchestration, and everything. Are we sort of letting the agents decide on the technology, the languages, the frameworks, and abstracting it to a prompt and functional layer? Or do we still want to standardize on certain frameworks for testing? What are you seeing?
Yes, see, now I think, like you rightly said, there are way too many options. So if you look at for any kind of frameworks, even starting itself from the models, the choice of model, there are like, we can't even count how many choices we have, right? Similarly, for the frameworks, for everything, there are multiple options. Now, I'll tell you practically from a customer. Now, there could be multiple ways we can do it, but I'll tell you from an enterprise is what I'm seeing, what is happening. Most of the enterprises, they are doing a due diligence, selecting the set of tools or frameworks, etc., and that they want to use for their whole enterprise, including testing. Let's say if I want to go with Anthropic, if I want to go with Google or AWS, whatever that could be. So complete due diligence is done based on various factors, on my risk appetite, on my from my budgeting perspective, from various other factors. And so that is one thing. Second is at that enterprise level, all those same set of tools are being used even at the testing. Now, when we look at creating some of those tools for testing, now there is a very interesting thing happening here, Manish, which I want to highlight. You asked about what kind of framework tools and all. So interesting thing is in testing, we already have a set of traditional tools which we have been using, right? So without naming any of those, I think we all understand there are a lot of those tools which are in the market. And if you look at some of those, now all those tool vendors are also adding AI capabilities on top of it. On the second hand, we also have some of the niche players who are only building AI native capabilities. Then third, we have that I, as an engineer, can myself develop some quick, dirty things and I can work, right? So if we do not, like you said, if we do not create those controls at the org level, then it becomes very messy, right? So because everybody has multiple options, they'll start doing whatever they want to do. So what we do is at a even at the QE level, if we have to come to QE level, so we identify that this is an existing tool set. Which of these are still relevant in my AI era? How much ROI I can get from them? If they have already upgraded to AI, can I bring that and see if it is fitting into my current ecosystem? And otherwise, there are a lot of places where I'm seeing these AI native tools which are getting embedded, right? Because building grounds up takes much more effort. So we are, not encouraging that and trying to use as much as possible what is available in the market, right? Now, third strategy which we have seen our customers taking is most of them will build their own platforms, which are again enterprise grade. So they will build a layer which will be your whole base models are there. Then your context layer will be built. Your agent control plane will be built. Only thing they tell or each of the sub organizational units is you build your agents and onboard them it for the consistency, for the same framework usage and all that. So and the same governance and everything. So that is a strategy which is happening. One, understand what tools you have, how you can reuse them if there are AI capabilities available now, or you want to retire some of them and migrate to the new set of tools or augment with new set of tools, and then build only those additional capabilities which will plug into your whole this ecosystem. So that is the strategy, Manish, we am seeing across enterprises.
I think this is underscored by what you've been talking about, governance, right? Which this is part of the governance process of
Yes.
standardization of what the whole organization will use.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one last question from my side. So, how are you seeing the testing change? What I mean to say is, earlier we were testing, functional, which is input output, but now there are agents. Agents themselves have become services. We had APIs at endpoints. Now we have agents. We have agentic services. We have voice. We have different, interaction touch points. So how should a QE start thinking about testing applications in this context?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And like we were saying earlier, and all these things with legacy still being around, right? So all these things are being built around legacy systems. So very few of our enterprise will be creating AI native applications as of now, because they can't discard whatever they have.
Yes.
So this become very, very, challenging, at the same time interesting problem statement, right? So earlier we were able to, identify, like you said, very simple. You do a functional layer testing, a database layer testing, API testing, and some kind of, performance stress testing, and you are done. And the biggest thing, like we were speaking earlier, is everything was deterministic. So you don't have to worry about, what happens in different scenarios. We will create maybe for one requirement, 5, 6 scenarios, and we were good. Some few happy parts and some a few negative scenarios, and we were good. Now, in this scenario, I think the multi-layer approach is needed. Let me start with some layers, right? So one, obviously, because any application that is being created would be used by some user as an end user. The user does not care what technology, what agents you have used, what agentic, all those things, they don't care. They only care about their experience, and they care about, as a user, I'm able to get what I'm supposed to get. So that we call as something as a business assurance. So any kind of AI application or an integrated application, you have to first test it as a end user, right? So it's a basic. And here again, if I get into a little bit more details, what I need to do for testing is AI applications and end user. So here you have to give different kind of data variants, different kind of those data sets that you have to create, so that all your scenarios are being covered. Right? That is one layer. Second layer that you have to do is now to make sure that your system, this different layer of AI systems, are good enough. You have to do a bit of responsible AI, what we say, that layer of testing, because you need to make sure that your whatever AI systems which are being used are responsibly delivered from, from the fairness, from the ethics, from any kind of underlying bias. All those things are being taken care, right? So there are a lot of open source tools available. There are a lot of market tools available, very easy plug and play, and you can test for some of those things. Next important thing that we have to test for is a whole, red or the security side of thing, because with the AI systems, the threat surface is now going to increase multifold. And we are not even touching on the topic of what happens with the mythos class models, which are, coming up. So with that, the whole equation changes. But even before that, I think a whole of red teaming becomes extremely important, where you do a different kind of threat modeling, see what happens when you are, try to poison the prompts, you are trying to, jailbreak through some of these prompts. So all those kind of testings is extremely important. And then there is a bit, a layer of the technical dimensions of testing, right? So now in the agentic system, one very important, and that we call as a benchmarking or whatever you can call it. One very important layer in that is now you have a agentic system. There's a different ways in which, so as an end user, if you ask me a question, can you book my travel? I can still book your travel. But underlying what is happening as an agent or an agentic system, I have multiple ways to do that job. Right? There are multiple tools I could call. There are multiple layers of decisions I can make. Did I do all that things in the shortest path or in the best possible path? So those kind of testing, which is again for a user, it doesn't matter, because for the user the output matters, but for you the performance. So this is what we're talking, not the stress or load performance, but the actual efficiency or efficacy of the system. So was it supposed to call this tool? Did it call that tool to make this decision? So those kind of testing also becomes very important. And then finally, obviously, all these kind of performance and these still remain, because in system, if it is, put under tremendous amount of load, then what happens? So those kind of, but essentially what I only covered about the things which change, right? Some of these additional things you will still continue to do, because there's integrations you have to do. But some additional layers which you need to test are some of these, Manish, what we are saying.
It's very interesting. I'm tempted to make a provocative and biased comment that it is the best time to be a tester, probably the worst time to be a developer, but the best time to be a tester, right? The expanse is immense, right? And I think it'll only get interesting. One is, as you said, there are existing legacy applications which are getting, AI enabled, quote unquote, where it's a very different type of testing that you would do. And the agentic applications which are being developed today for tomorrow, that would require a very different level of testing. So I think for the audience, the biggest takeaway would be best time to be in testing, but more importantly, paying attention to the governance models, which is essentially processes that you have to put in place, and work a lot on the trust angle, because in the end, the QE still has to approve the gate. Right? You can use all the tools, you can use all of these agentic systems to accelerate your testing cycles, but in the end, you have to certify and assure that the application is good to go. Thank you so much, Harleen, for sharing these experiences. I learned a lot today, and I'm sure the audience did as well. I will let you have some closing remarks before we end the session.
Sure. Yeah, it was very interesting, Manish, and I think I also enjoyed this conversation. And like you rightly said, right? So best time to be a tester, and the owner still remains on people, right? So there is, whenever there are some decisions which needs to be made, it is done by humans, and AI will not own it. And that is where I think as testers we play a very tremendous role in the days to come. So very exciting times ahead. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Harleen. As always, appreciate your time and that you joined us again for TestView conference. Have a good day. And audience, thank you for joining. Stay tuned for the next conversation, next session, and make sure that you join into this conversation that I just had with Harleen on LinkedIn and X, and use the TestView conference as the hashtag for the conversation. Thank you so much, and hope you have a great conference ahead. Thank you, Harleen.
Thank you.